tonight's news edition. His Majesty the King welcomes Palestinian figures from Jerusalem and says Jordan strongly rejects any change of the status quo at the Holy Haram al-Sharif compound. A top U.S. official says most of Russian airstrikes in Syria have hit the moderate Syrian opposition as UN envoy holds talks in Moscow on the crisis. And unstable weather will continue to affect the kingdom with strong winds and thundery showers forecast. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King said Jordan stands firmly in defense of holy sites in Jerusalem and vehemently rejects any change of the status quo at the Haram al-Sharif compound. Welcoming a delegation from Jerusalem, King Abdullah said Jordan stands by the Arabs in the holy city and supports their steadfastness in the face of Israeli violations against the Aqsa Mosque and the Haram al-Sharif compound. He told the delegation from the Jerusalem Waqf, the religious endowment that administers Al-Aqsa Mosque and other Islamic and Christian figures from the holy city, that Jordan will continue to carry out its role towards Jerusalem at the political and religious levels. He saluted the Arabs of Jerusalem who have been facing challenges for quite some time, not just in the past months. Nothing had changed in Jordan's position that advocates maintaining the status quo that had been in place before the 1967 occupation of the city, the king said. He said Jordan could pursue its diplomatic and legal option, but will monitor what's going on the ground and how far Israel's prime minister is committed to keeping the status quo. He said Jordan is in contact with and coordination with Western nations, which are ready to work with the kingdom in this endeavor. Commenting on a proposal to install surveillance cameras at Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Compound to monitor Israel's compliance, the king said the cameras are a Jordanian project that will be carried out through the Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs and in cooperation with our Palestinian brothers on the ground. King Abdullah explained that the installation of the cameras will take about 6 weeks. He also said Jordan is looking into the prospect of returning Palestinians and Israelis to the negotiation table to find a final solution to the Palestinian issue. Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian driver in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli army said he tried to ram into an Israeli border policeman, critically wounding him. Hebron has become the focal point of violent unrest, and the military said it was the 30th attack against Israelis in the area since the start of October, around the time the latest wave of violence began. Israeli occupation forces also arrested more than 30 Palestinians during raids in West Bank towns. The ongoing tension has taken a heavy toll on the economy in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Here's more.
Closed for business in the West Bank. Once vibrant markets in Hebron are now shuttered. Clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli soldiers occur on almost a daily basis.
When a couple of stones are hurled towards Israeli forces, they start firing rubber bullets, gas, and sound grenades at all the shops. And there are people who cannot take the smell of the poisonous gas.
In Jerusalem, a fear of shopping.
It's a bit worrying. You have to be more vigilant and look around you. It's a shame because you start worrying about everyone, looking at everyone. Are they going to attack me? Are they going to hurt me? And you have to be a bit careful.
With Arabs and Jews rubbing shoulders in the old city streets on a daily basis, both communities are on edge.
His Majesty the King discussed with the Spanish King Felipe VI a number of regional issues. During a telephone call, the two leaders also talked about Jordanian-Spanish ties. The top U.S. diplomat for the Middle East told a congressional committee that 85 to 90% of Russian strikes in Syria have hit the moderate Syrian opposition. Ann Patterson also said President Barack Obama is considering additional ways to intensify the campaign against Daesh. Russia boosted its military support for President Bashar al-Assad's fight against rebels in the 4.5-year Syrian civil war. This report has more.
This is the aftermath of Russian airstrikes in the Daesh-held city of Raqqa in northern Syria. Large plumes of smoke rise from tall buildings and bridges, where burnt-out vehicles block the passageway. Witnesses report a hospital was damaged, where chairs and wooden boards remained scattered along its corridors. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said it was necessary to decide who to consider terrorist groups and who legitimate opposition groups in Syria before the next round of talks on the Syrian crisis in Vienna. At a news conference with Lavrov, United Nations Syria envoy Staffan de Mistura said it is important to work on the formation of an inclusive government in Syria.
And I think the regional players and the international community can help in reminding both sides, the government and the opposition, to come quickly for starting discussing without preconditions on either side in order to actually address the points which were agreed upon at the Vienna meeting, which are and should be in line with the Geneva Communique. Basically, we have already the papers ready for them to start talking. They need to do what we saw in Vienna. They need to start talking.
The top U.S. diplomat for Europe, Victoria Nuland, said Russia had also begun to deploy ground weapons, such as artillery, to areas Assad forces have lost to the moderate opposition, including near the cities of Hama and Homs.
Now Russia's fielding its own artillery and other ground assets around Hama and Homs, greatly increasing Russia's own soldiers' vulnerability to counterattack.
Southeast of Aleppo in northern Syria, the Syrian army regained control of a road, taking back the government's only supply route into the city from Daesh fighters, who had seized it last month. Syrian state TV said army forces took full control of the road, which runs from Aleppo and links up with the cities of Hama and Homs further south. Since Russian jets began airstrikes on September 30, Syrian troops have been trying to advance in different cities, aiming to retake cities under Daesh control. The United Nations reported that at least 250,000 people have been killed during the Syrian war. Hiba Al-Atoum for the News at 10.
In northern Iraq, Daesh launched a rare attack inside Kurdish-held territory, briefly taking over a local government compound near several oil fields. Security sources said a suicide bomber had blown himself up at a checkpoint, clearing the way for 3 other militants to enter the compound in a town south of the regional capital, Erbil. The 3 insurgents then occupied the mayor of the town's office, throwing grenades and firing at Turkish security forces surrounding the compound. Turkish forces regained control after one of the militants was shot dead and other 2 blew themselves up. Investigators have extracted and validated the contents of the flight data recorder, one of 2 black boxes recovered from the Russian airplane that crashed in Egypt. Egypt's Civil Aviation Ministry said the second black box, which contains the cockpit voice recorder, was partially damaged and much work was required to extract the data. The Russian-operated Airbus crashed on Saturday shortly after taking off from the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh on its way to St. Petersburg, killing all 224 people on board. In an audio message posted on Twitter today, Daesh militant group's Egyptian affiliate insisted it was behind the crash, but the claim was previously dismissed by Russian and Egyptian officials. However, Russian officials have said the plane probably broke up in the air, leaving open the prospect of some kind of explosion on board. A car bomb targeting a policeman's club in the Egyptian city of Al Arish killed 6 people and wounded 10. Daesh Egypt affiliate Sinai province claimed responsibility for the attack, which it described as a suicide bombing. The group has killed hundreds of soldiers and police in the past 2 years. A Russian-built cargo plane with passengers on board crashed after taking off from the airport in South Sudan's capital, Juba, killing dozens of people. The Antonov 12B turboprop plane crashed soon after takeoff, leaving chunks of wreckage, bodies, and cargo strewn along a bank of the White Nile River. The Civil Aviation Authority said the number of dead was still being counted. A presidential spokesman said the plane was carrying 18 people, including 6 foreign crew, 5 Armenians, and 1 Russian. He said 15 of them died and 3 South Sudanese nationals survived, including a child. Armenia's foreign ministry confirmed that 5 of its citizens who were members of the crew died in the crash. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said parliament should make discussions on a new constitution a priority. He spoke in his first major address since the ruling AK party won back its majority in a snap election at the weekend. Erdogan said Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu would consult opposition leaders on rewriting the constitution. If the negotiations failed, Erdogan said he would back a decision to consult the electorate on the issue. The Turkish president called on opposition leaders to heed people's will for a new constitution and said anyone who resists the people's wish for a new constitution will be held accountable in the next elections 4 years later. He also vowed to continue the fight against Kurdish insurgents until the last militant is liquidated. Hundreds of people have been killed in Turkey since July after a ceasefire with the PKK collapsed, sparking some of the worst clashes in years. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said he would visit Turkey for key refugee talks this month as he called for the faster release of EU aid funds for the crises. Tsipras said Greece would continue meeting its responsibilities despite facing an incalculable cost to rescue, register, and feed the refugees. His remarks came as 30 refugees from Syria and Iraq were transferred from Greece to Luxembourg as part of the country's first relocation. 6 families were being relocated from Athens as part of the EU-approved plan to ease the burden on border nations inundated by this year's influx of hundreds of thousands of refugees. Almost 600,000 refugees have entered Greece through its long sea border with Turkey this year. European Parliament President Martin Schulz said the European Union needed to completely support Greece with tackling the migrant crisis.
I agree fully that we have to support Greece with all our means, but on the other hand, and here also I agree with the Prime Minister, the country must meet the criteria of the agreements made between Greece and the institutions, because this is a precondition to regain trust, and not trust of a European Parliament's president or trust of whomever. Trust of those people who believe that it is worth to invest in your country because the country has a sustainable economic future.
Aid flights rushed food and tents to the Yemeni island of Socotra after it was hit by a rare cyclone. The United Nations said Cyclone Chapala has displaced 40,000 people. The storm killed 3 people earlier when it made landfall on the island. Another man drowned when the hurricane-force storm reached mainland Yemen's 5th largest city, Muqallaf. The Emirates News Agency reported 3 Omani planes bearing tents and food and a United Arab Emirates cargo plane with 20 tons of food and blankets have arrived on the remote island in the past 24 hours. The storm is set to dissipate as it leaves warm waters and heads inland into Yemen and Saudi Arabia's desert interior. Karolina Pliskova cruised past Jelena Jankovic, while Carla Suarez Navarro beat injured Andrea Petkovic in the WTA Elite Trophy in China. Third seed Pliskova of the Czech Republic beat her Serb opponent 6-4, 3-6, 6-2 in her opening match to top Group C. Spain's Suarez Navarro had a much easier time, the second seed seeing off Petkovic 6-love, 6-love, the Germans struggling with a thigh injury throughout. Manchester United forward Wayne Rooney secured a 1-0 Champions League victory over CSKA Moscow as they went top of Group B. United seemed to be heading for a fourth successive goalless draw before Rooney met a Jesse Lingard cross and sent a thumping header past the keeper in the 79th minute. The win left Man United on 7 points, one clear of Wolfsburg and PSV Eindhoven, who won 2-0 at home to the Germans. And now a look at the weather forecast. Chilly and dusty across much of the country tonight as unstable weather will continue to affect the region. Thundery showers are forecast and might be heavy at times. Winds will be southeasterly brisk, stirring up dust in the countryside with poor visibility, especially in the country's south. As the unstable weather deepens tomorrow, more rain and dust are forecast for much of the country, with highs not exceeding the 17-degree mark in the hilly areas. The port city of Aqaba should expect scattered rain tonight and tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to the prevailing dusty weather and rainfall forecast for the next 2 days. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King welcomes Palestinian figures from Jerusalem and says Jordan strongly rejects any change of the status quo at the Holy Haram al-Sharif compound. A top U.S. official says most of Russian airstrikes in Syria have hit the moderate Syrian opposition as a UN envoy holds talks in Moscow on the crisis. And unstable weather will continue to affect the kingdom with strong winds and thundery showers in the forecast. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.